Okay, so today I was thinking about touching upon politics. Even though I'm not really much of a political person, um, I wanted to relate politics as it relates to Buddhism. And politics is going to affect every aspect of our lives, no matter how much we hate politics. In my experience, I'm a little over 40 years old, so in my experience in life, I was born during the Reagan administration. It doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, if it's Republican or Democrat or whatever. Politicians in general get involved in corruption, and that's all politicians. I don't care what side they're on. Like I said, politicians in general get involved in corruption. So you're always going to be left with a choice, and that's been my entire life. And I'm sure our grandparents and great grandparents would have noticed the same thing, that pretty much every single politician that is out there gets involved in some level of corruption. Um, and People are looking for, that one person that is not involved in corruption. Typically, if you do have a politician, which is rare, but it does happen every so often, where you have a politician who is not actually involved in corruption, that politician usually isn't very popular. And there are reasons for that, but you're usually going to end up with two different possible candidates. And people say, well, do I pick between stupid or dumb, basically, or everybody has their own different expression that they may use. Basically, this evil or that evil. You're really never left with a decision between this really great person and this not so great person. So, as somebody who is concerned about trying to promote your ideals, um, what ends up happening is you can get completely frustrated with politics and either disengage and not vote for anybody, or vote for a third party, minor party, that has real no chance of winning, as some sort of protest. Um, Typically, what you'll notice is when somebody is in their late teenage phase, early 20s, we tend to be very idealistic, and this is not just this generation. This is literally every single generation. I know that they said that about children born in the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s. And so in my lifetime, for sure, in every single generation, once you hit that phase between late teens, let's say 17, 18, 19, and early 20s, people become very idealistic and very strong believers in certain things. And then as you get older, a little wiser, a little bit more experienced, you kind of start to tone that down a little bit. And it doesn't mean that once we get older that we accept corruption, or that corruption is okay, but sort of gain a little bit of perspective, because our politics is built naturally to have a certain level of corruption in it, and that's all any democracy is going to be that way. And if you are voting, you're going to be that way. Now the problem is that if you don't have a democracy, if you have like a king or an emperor, they can literally do whatever they want at their whim. You may end up with one really good king or queen that does a lot of really good things for their people, but then you're also going to end up with people like in your kingdom or your empire, um, can be thrown back and forth between really great and really bad. And bad, scary bad, because they can just arrest you and throw you in prison for no reason because you just said something outrageous, in their mind about the king or queen. So what happens is that democracies have this weakness, but it's really the only way to have some sort of protections for liberty. So, because you don't want to be at the whims of a king or queen or emperor, empress, or whoever. So really, democracy is the way to go. But because you have people voting, um, what's going to happen is people still want to gain power. They have a lust for power. And usually you don't have somebody involved in politics unless they have a lust for power. So it's very rare to even find a person who doesn't have that. Sometimes some people may get involved just because they actually care about people. But those people end up getting weeded out as far as a very popular candidate simply because of those who do have a lust for power are willing to do anything and say anything, lie, cheat, okay? And so let's say, for example, let's say you have 5 candidates, and 4 of them are corrupt. One of them is trying to do the right thing, trying to help people. So what's going to happen is this candidate isn't really doing things that are corrupt, taking bribes, things like that. But the 4 that are taking bribes and are involved in some level of corruption, making promises, even if, and some of these people that are involved in some level of corruption may do it using a legal path. But when we look at their actions and all the things that they do, even though they took all the legal pathways, some decisions can be very questionable, how they may flip-flop from one issue to the other. Um, and and sometimes you may say, well, they have some sort of benefits that they may be receiving from companies, even though it may be perfectly legal for them to receive those benefits, and it creates a conflict of interest. Um, and so what happens is you have these big corporations that maybe say, hey, once you get in office, we want you to help us get this done that would make things easier for our corporation. So what they would do is say, we will make donations to your campaign, maybe in a perfectly legal way, but we'll make our donations to your campaign. We'll tell our employees that we are behind you. We will publicly endorse you. And a lot of different corporations will do this type of thing, where they'll sit there and try to make a deal with a candidate. The candidate gives them the best deal is the candidate they put their weight behind, right? So what ends up happening is the masses, through either social media, and even before social media, we had TV still. We had TV stations that, cable, and even before cable, you still had actual TVs. You would really have to go way back to before the 1950s, before you get to a time when people didn't even have TVs. But even then, they had ways of getting the word out. You go through maybe like newspapers and things like that. But in any case, what you're going to see is that they would find ways to promote and make sure the masses knew and heard about and gained a sense of trust in one of the candidates who are making these promises to the corporations, as opposed to the ones who don't make any promises to any corporations whatsoever, or they want to try to do everything in the most idealistically right way, are very unknown, and people, they haven't developed a sense of trust because they really don't know much about them. And say, well, this is sort of like a figure. It's like, well, it seems to be good. I hear some really good things coming from this candidate, and it seems like a very lovely person, but I don't know enough about them. And people, as crazy as it sounds, will choose the person they know a lot about, and know that that person has been involved in corruption because they know a lot about them, and they have developed that sense of trust because they know what they're going to get, or at least they feel like they do, as opposed to the trustworthy candidate who they don't really know a lot about. So some people have felt that the best thing to do in these cases is to vote the third party, and some people have felt abstaining from voting is the best thing to do. Most of us, when we get older, and there are people, once they get older, they stick to those guns as far as third party voting. But most of us, when we get older, we start to think a little bit differently about how much our vote counts, and knowing that you're really not, because there's nothing we can do about it. We're powerless in this sense. Our voice is important. So like, let's say, you make videos and you try to tell people about things, and make your stances known about things, or whatever the case may be for you. Things that you feel strongly about, you educate yourself on it to the best of your ability. But what happens is once voting day comes, you really want to have a say one way or the other, as for, like, say, a candidate, and most of us will choose one of the candidates to actually have a chance of winning. And that's, a lot of people say that's absolutely wrong. You should just make sure that you vote your conscience. But that's what most people will do as they get older. Young people kind of fit in a few different categories, actually. It is the age, like I said, where people tend to be a little bit more idealistic and very strong in their convictions, because they, people that have a moral backbone as they're growing up, they will have an ideal of the way the world should work in their head. And once you find out that the world doesn't actually work that way, and that there's really nothing we can do about it, we find ways to try to push back according to those ideals later in life to the best of our ability, knowing that our actions do matter, but not something that we need to stress ourselves out about, because it's really something that's, a lot of it's out of our control. And once you start to learn that concept of how powerless we are, it doesn't mean that we don't do anything. And see, that's a whole nother discussion, because like you could fall into the trap a lot of older people do of, I'm not going to do anything because I can't do anything. I'm powerless, so I shouldn't do anything. And that's actually another perspective I think is something that we need to avoid, because we should do what we can. And there's a prayer that says, God grant me the strength to do to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So we need the courage to change the things we can, to accept the things that we cannot change. There are things that we are powerless over, but there are things that we can do, and we should do those things. Do the things that we have the power to do. But in those younger years, some people will fall into the category of, it's my fun years, drinking and having fun, partying, and won't vote for that reason. They haven't actually developed very strong convictions on what's right or wrong. Those people tend to, as they get older, develop stronger convictions and regret the mistakes they made when they were younger. So not all young people will fit into that idealistic mind frame. That's, one sect of young people, but there's, and probably even more young people just don't care one way or the other. Young people tend to not vote at all. And that's, for one reason or another, young people tend to not vote. So, we have these different perspectives on what we should do about our ideals. Now, like I said, I wanted to connect this to the Buddhist perspective. And so and I live in the United States, so particularly what are we seeing in the United States today in 2025? One of the things about Buddhism is trying. It's difficult, but at least for me, trying to have this sense of um, calm and peace, where um, people, like I said, like a lot of this stuff's out of my control, out of our control. People are going to do things that are immoral, that are wrong in the political spectrum, in the political world. People are going to get hurt. And I think, one of the things we want to do is to try to have a conscience and know that that's wrong. Do what we can to help prevent those tragedies from happening. What is actually within our power. And so, in the Buddhist perspective, because of the fact that, we have this sense of understanding that I can't change other people. I can only do what I can do. And so the sense of acceptance of, even when tragedies are happening, like a war, let's say, like an example would be the war in Ukraine. Lots of innocent people are dying. I don't live in Ukraine. I can't go there and protect all the innocent people from dying. I can't. I'm even if I did live over there, I'm 5'4". I weigh a little over 100 pounds. I wouldn't be able to fight off all those armies of Russians anyway. And so there's a lot of that stuff that's out of our control, and it's a lot of really horrible things. All the people that have died in Gaza Strip and things like that, out of my control. Really not much I can personally do about it. Now you can say, well, if you have extra money, you can donate something to those causes. That gets into a little bit of a sophisticated area where you really, if you are donating your money somewhere, which is a good idea if you feel very strongly about that, you want to make sure your money's actually going to where you think it's going to. Because somebody could say, hey, and this happens with a lot of charities, unfortunately, where you donate your money to a charity and then 90% of it's going to some CEO at the top of that charity. And really, like, only 10% of your money actually goes to funding the things that you were wanting to fund. So, what we end up with is you just got to investigate that, and whatever you feel in your conscience. Sometimes it's the intention that counts. So even if it's only 10% of your money going there, especially if you can't really verify how much or what percentage of your money is going to that cause, and it just make you feel better for attempting to donate to that cause, that could be a good idea. And then also, like, how much money do you actually have? Like, I barely pay my bills from month to month. I mean, I really don't have a lot of extra money to throw around. So, and I'm in crazy amounts of debt and things like that, like a lot of Americans are. So, it's really not as easy as it sounds, but there are still things we can do, like, try to inform ourselves to the best of our abilities and speak about things as we understand them and the reality of things. So the point is that there are these really horrible things, whether it's the Gaza Strip or Ukraine or things happening in our own country, where something is completely out of our control. But what I am capable of doing for myself that can benefit other people is what, as a Buddhist, I need to concentrate on. So you have that, but you don't want to fall into this idea of, or at least from my understanding of the Buddhist perspective, of just not doing anything at all. Because we could, like, let's say, for example, if they are going to put immigrants into And this is one of the things that we're going to sort of drift into this political stuff that's happening in the United States. But they're going to put these immigrants into these basically they're camps, detention centers, and ship them to their previous countries or whatever. And on one side, we want to try to stay as neutral as possible between political parties to maintain a sense of equilibrium up here, a sense of accuracy, not getting too involved, because I guarantee you people are lying from the Democrat side, and I guarantee you people are lying from the Republican side, and people lie from both sides. People are involved in corruption on both sides. But when you know that something like this is happening, and we do want to have a sense of neutrality to maintain a sense of equilibrium up here, but you know that something that's just not right is occurring, we wouldn't want to get into this sense of, well, it's not my problem. So the immigrants being put in detention camps and things like that, and you would think, okay, well, the original Trump promise to his base was, well, it'd be illegal immigrants, the criminals, things like that. That's clearly not actually happening, but those who understood that it was a whole racist dialogue to begin with knew that was never going to be the case. So there are actually statistics that demonstrate that most of the violent criminals are actually Americans, not illegal immigrants. So, and a very small percentage of illegal immigrants commit violent crimes. And I heard one of the news anchors or somebody on Fox News one time say, as a response to that, well, even one illegal immigrant committing a violent crime is too much. The Americans committing violent crimes, that's our problem because they're Americans. But the illegal immigrants, they shouldn't even be here. Okay. So, but the problem with that thinking is, but you are going after legal citizens who have birthright citizenship and trying to end that. So Trump signed an executive order. I don't remember if it's the first day he's president or within the first week. I don't remember the specific day he did that, to end birthright citizenship, which is impossible. You cannot sign. It's completely illegal, because the reason why it's illegal and why the executive order, I don't think it's been implemented yet. I don't think it can be. And I think the pushback was one of those things that sort of just kind of was something that just kind of legally had to happen, because the executive order trying to end birthright citizenship, the president doesn't actually have the power to do that, because there's a constitutional amendment. I don't remember if it's the 14th Amendment or something like that, but it's in the Constitution. One of the amendments guarantees citizenship to all people born in the United States. So once you are born in the United States, by the Constitution, you have citizenship in the United States. So the only way to legally end birthright citizenship would be to amend the Constitution, which requires an act of Congress. And that's not like a 51% to 49% act of Congress. I think the amendments need 2/3 of the votes. I don't remember for sure. It's been a while since I studied constitutional amendments and things like that, but I think it's 2/3. It's a vast majority. It's like a super majority or something. So what happens is that you need this super majority. You have to have like 67 percent, 2/3 of the vote, in order to pass a constitutional amendment. So, and I believe it would have to pass through both the Senate and the House. And then constitutional amendments also need a certain percentage of states to ratify it. So just because, and that's actually happened before, where something passed through both the Congress and the House as a constitutional amendment and did not get ratified by all the states. And that's where the constitutional amendment died. And I believe that one had to do with women's rights. I'm not 100% sure on the Constitution amendment number that they were trying to push through, but there was an amendment having to do with women's rights, and it passed both. It had the supermajority in the Congress and in the House of Representatives, and it was passed, and it never made it into the actual Constitution because not enough states ratified it. So we have, anytime we amend the Constitution, you have a very rigorous process that has to be done. And the fact that it is codified in the Constitution that people born in the United States are American citizens means that there is no executive order that can undo that, and that executive order is actually illegal in a sense. Not illegal, Trump going to prison illegal. It's illegal in the sense that it's not within the legal framework of the United States, meaning that the executive order is as good as toilet paper because it literally does nothing. It cannot do anything. Anytime there is something that is like by executive order, it has to be within the presidential powers to do that. The president can't just say with the stroke of a pen, because we don't live under a king, we don't live under a dictator. The Constitution requires that basically the way that our government works is that the executive orders have to be within the framework of our government. It's the reason why between 2016 and 2020, Trump attempted to end the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, over and over and over again, and he could never do it because he couldn't just executive order it away because it was passed through Congress. And executive order can't just wipe away the Affordable Care Act. You'd have to get Congress to undo the Affordable Care Act, which makes it very difficult and very unlikely for Obamacare to ever get wiped away. But that one's different because it's codified in the Congress, not in the Constitution. So you wouldn't need the supermajority that you would need all the same process to get rid of Obamacare as you would a constitutional amendment. So once it makes it to a constitutional amendment, it's even more difficult to get rid of it. So it's even crazier to think that somebody would try by executive order to undo birthright citizenship. And my point is that that these are American citizens born in the United States, and they are trying to simply throw these people in detention camps and send them back to their previous countries, even though they're American citizens. And I know that they're, and I don't know of all the stories, obviously, but I've heard of already happening American citizens being detained by ICE. There was a situation where mother, her daughter, and her and the grandmother were all detained by ICE, all of them American citizens, and it took a whole thing just to get their birth certificates so that they could prove that they were American citizens before they were released by ICE. What about all the times, let's say, do you have your birth certificate readily handy? What about those people? Let's say your birth certificate, it's probably stacked in a closet somewhere in some box somewhere. And and you may not even know where it is. That's why people have to order their updated copies of the birth certificate, because you don't always know where you put it, can't find it. It could have burned in a fire for somebody. And so imagine all those people that do not readily have their birth certificate handy, who may have been detained by ICE. I just read a story today of a person who had a green card and was detained by ICE, and they were claiming that this person was being their privileges for being in the United States was being revoked, even though they were legally here. They were not illegal. It was a person who was completely legal here, had a green card, and they were being revoked because the person had political opinions opposed to the Trump administration. And that really is what it boiled down to. So again, this is my point here, is that what we see happening is different than the Trump promise. It was just the illegals, the criminals. Well, this was a teacher who had never had a single crime committed or anything. And these types of things are happening a lot. So you wonder about all the times that it has happened that we don't even know about. Because if the person just disappears and doesn't have a lot of people to contact, and it doesn't make its way into the news, there could be hundreds and hundreds more that we don't know about that are sitting off in one of these detention camps somewhere unlawfully, that are either American citizens or have green cards, and are legally here, that are being thrown into one of these detention camps. And but we knew that from the beginning. We knew that these were racist people. That there's this neo-Nazi movement that has become very, very popular nowadays. I mean, very, very popular. I mean, it's more popular than I would have thought it would have been, I guess. I mean, I don't really know what percentage of people are actually neo-Nazis, but I do know that it is a growing movement. It could be as small as 1% of the population, 5% of the population in the United States. They could be a very loud minority, but the fact that we have Nazis, neo-Nazis, living in the United States, waving their flags openly, and their voices being heard so loud, it's just kind of scary. But you have these people, and this was always about racism from the very beginning, because they do not want brown-skinned people in the United States. They want to this Nazi ideal of getting rid of non-Americans, and that's a whole other discussion, but that was the idea. So back to Buddhism, how does it relate to Buddhism? So, as a Buddhist, you can think, okay, well, this is out of my power, out of my control. What can I actually do about that? But at the same time, recognizing how immoral and how wrong it is to be hurting people based on the color of their skin. And so we're placed in a position in politics sometimes where sometimes a political party or a certain group of people within a political party will do things that are clearly so immoral that it kind of outweighs a lot of the normal corruption we would typically see in politics. And so as a Buddhist, I personally believe the perfect form of government for which we can live and operate is what the American system had given us. The American system gave us a system of government that so when we're talking about how politics tends to get dirty, democracy is really the only way, because without voting you end up having some sort of dictator king, queen, emperor, empress, um, who at their whim could do anything. Um, Democracy, is going to get dirty because when you're voting, they're going to make allies with people with lots of money to get their voice heard more and develop more trust so that people vote for them and get them in, even though that they are involved in some level of corruption. And politics is about dividing people. Try to put as much hate on the other candidate as you can. It doesn't matter. They don't have to love you as a candidate as long as they hate the other person more. As long as they're scared of the other person more than they are scared of you. So that's politics, right? And it's a nasty environment. But what the American system did that was completely different, it wasn't so much codifying the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. That was great, okay? But what the American system did, it provided an opportunity to maintain a safe, free country for years and years to come, was the separation of powers. And everybody knows from school the separation of powers between the Congress and the House of Representatives being the legislative branch, the executive branch being headed by the president, and the judicial branch being our courts, headed by the Supreme Court. So those three branches of government, most of us know about that, but a lot of people don't realize how much farther the powers of government are separated that allows this country, because let's say, for example, the Republicans took all three branches of government. And it's actually debatable in a way, because it's Trump is not actually a Republican in the sense of let's say, for example, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, okay, and both senior and junior. The Republican Party of the past would not recognize the policies endorsed by Trump, because anybody who was, back in Ronald Reagan's days and Bush era knows that the policies embraced by Trump are not Republican at all. Actually, Kamala Harris, interestingly enough, was giving us rhetoric that sounded like the Republicans from Bush, talking about giving money, allotting money for small business owners to get started. I used to hear Bush and people like that talk like that, trying to help small businesses to boost up the economy. Never would have thought I'd hear a Democrat giving that rhetoric. And the reason why Kamala Harris was able to do that was because I don't know that Trump even knows the Republican platform of the past. And it seems like the Republican platform is changing. So my point is that it's debatable that Republicans, in a sense, have control over all three branches of government. Republicans in name have it because the Republican Party endorsed Trump. Wrongly or rightly, they endorsed Trump. So as far as the name brand goes, Trump being the president, you have the executive branch, and then you also have, the majority, even if it's a slight majority in the legislative branch, and then you have a very large majority in the Supreme Court, because Trump had packed the Supreme Court in his first term. So you have all three branches of government, and you're sitting there thinking, how come our country hasn't completely devolved into some sort of dictatorship already? And some people are saying that Trump's already made himself a dictator. I would say not yet, even though that may be the plan over the near future, to try to do that. Where's all this pushback coming from that has caused some of his executive orders to even fail? And so the separation of powers goes deeper than just the three branches of government. And what you have is you have the level at the state level, and state rights was used during the Civil War or just before the Civil War to justify slavery. So a lot of times the people crying out state rights is doing it for the purpose of being able to alienate some group of people, unfortunately. However, state rights is a legitimate thing, and it's a legitimate power that and this is where you can understand why the whole thing about state rights to have slaves is actually unconstitutional and wrong, and why their argument failed is at a constitutional level. But the state rights in the 10th Amendment, I believe, says that those rights, and I'm probably going to be paraphrasing this slightly because I'm doing it from memory, but those state rights, the things, those rights retained by the states that are not mentioned in the Constitution shall not be infringed, or something of that nature. So we're talking about additional rights not mentioned in the Constitution. That, okay, even though I might be paraphrasing and I don't remember the specific verbiage of the Constitution, of the 10th Amendment, but essentially that's what it gets to, is that those additional rights, you don't have a right to own a person, because that person has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that's where that whole thing fails at a constitutional level, even though those types of people have enjoyed to try to invoke state rights. What it works for, and the actual intention of the 10th Amendment, was additional rights, not you having the right to take somebody else's right. It'd be like saying, I have the right to murder you because I retain that right. No, you don't have a right to murder somebody. So the state can't just go off and become like its own mini dictatorship and kill people ruthlessly just because they're retaining the right to do so. Because those people have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So additional rights, not subtracting rights, not a state's rights to take away your rights. Okay, because as an American citizen, you have a right to the things provided in the Constitution. So the states can't say, well, I have the right to take away the rights that the Constitution provides. No. So state rights is actually a legitimate thing. It's a legitimate power. It has been abused in the past to try to strip people of rights in their own states. Okay, but the actual amendment of the Constitution is to provide additional rights. So if your state wants to have a $15 an hour or a $20 an hour minimum wage that is above the national minimum wage, let's say the national minimum wage is, I think, 7 something an hour. I don't remember the specific number, but it's like 7 something an hour. If your state wants to provide $15 to $20 an hour, they can give you that additional minimum wage, that additional right. So a state has a right at the state level to do more for your rights than what the national level is protecting. They don't have a right to say, well, we don't like the national minimum wage, so we're just going to say people can work for free as long as you feed them. Okay, so that is not the right use of state rights. The right use of it is you can give additional minimum wage, not take away the minimum wage on a state level. And that's kind of like an example of state rights being an additional power, a powerful power, a powerful means of checking the federal government. And And so states are allowed to provide additional rights, not take away rights, not infringe upon rights. And so state rights is a legitimate power. It's very important. You also have the power of the money, financial power. And corporations are separate entities from the government, or they're supposed to be. And actually, fascism, I've heard, I don't know all the details, but fascism, properly defined, I've heard, was the idea of corporate powers merging with the governmental powers. The idea is that, so let's say, one of the reasons why I could never be a communist personally, and I think people have a right to believe what they want, so I don't go off into even like fighting against communists and all that, but at the same time, I believe our government should never be communist, because even like in communism, the money powers would still be concentrated in the government. What we have in the United States, by having capitalism in the United States, separates the money powers from the government. Okay? But fascism would also combine the money powers to the government, because that is the corporations and the powers of the government and the corporations would start merging in a sense. So either way, whether it's communism or fascism, both of them would put money powers too closely aligned with the government. Essentially, having capitalism in the United States is another check to the balance of power that it is within the fabric of our country. A lot of people don't think about that, but this is a very important thing, because corporations having a separate entity from the government that has a lot of money, a lot of power, gives us a way through corporation and through business to provide freedom to our country. And that is really hard to explain in detail precisely all the ways that can actually protect our freedom. The only problem is that everything should be in checks and balances. So the government should check the corporations too, and the corporations can check the government in a sense, in the sense that the government actually has legal authority over corporations and needs to impose regulations and things like that, minimum wages to protect workers. Conditions need to be safe for workers. So you can't have corporate greed just running amok and destroying everything, but corporations, they check the government in a sort of a subtle way. It's not something that is a legal check, but if you have the money, you have the power. They say that money talks and bullshit walks. Well, all these people with millions and billions of dollars, like I said, like if they're the ones donating and things like that to campaign funds, and they have a sense of power through their financial gains. If you're pissing off a lot of corporations and their ability to be free, have free enterprise, then they're probably going to do things that's just going to make the government's life miserable in different ways. So in a way, that corporate greed can be used to check the government in that sense. And when you use your money to purchase from corporations that agree with your political alignments, what will happen is you are voting with your dollars. Doesn't mean that those corporations are saints, angels, or anything like that, but it helps provide a way for you to continue to maintain that balance of power in the United States. So corporations is a good thing. The only thing is because of the amount of greed involved. Let's say, for example, Elon Musk aligning himself with the president so closely with the president. We're seeing what can happen when corporations make an exerted effort deliberately to exert that kind of power over a president or the government directly. That is technically supposed to be illegal. The Doge office, DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, has not been confirmed by Congress. It's illegal. But, something being illegal, you have to actually have people willing to take action against it. Apparently, we don't have enough people willing to take action against it. We have some people. There are cases going to court trying to help that situation. A lot of people who support Trump think that Doge is a great thing. But here is the thing that you really have to consider on the on that. There are legal pathways to do exactly what Trump's doing. Trump is choosing to do the illegal pathway. So it's and that's what's mind-boggling about it sometimes when you're looking at it. You're trying to figure out why are they doing something illegally that they could have done legally. All they had to do was go to Congress, and Congress probably would have handed them a confirmation of Doge and Elon Musk on top of Doge. I mean, Congress would have probably done that for him because Republicans control the Congress. Why are they choosing to use a department that has not been confirmed by Congress and not going to Congress to try to get it when there's a legal pathway to do it? I don't know. Maybe they feel like they're on a time schedule. They want to implement Project 2025 and force everybody into this box that allows them to get the tenets of Project 2025 through in a hurry. Because, Project 2025, it's not Project 2026. It's not Project 2025 through 2028. It's Project 2025. So maybe they're just trying to force it through in a hurry. I can't really say for sure their reasoning behind it. There was a legal pathway to do it, and they chose the illegal way. And anytime a new government agency comes about like that, there's a process which it should have been done. It was not done that way. There's also a chain of evidence. Those who think that Doge is investigating these agencies to find fraud and all that stuff, none of that can be used in court because there isn't a chain of custody that was followed. The right way to do it is Trump appointed his FBI head. Trump could just tell the FBI head to do the investigation, and then you have a chain of custody that could be used in the court of law. By using Doge and not the FBI and not having a chain of custody that could be used in the court of law, there is no way to use any of that evidence to demonstrate in a legal manner that any corruption was done, that any foul play was done, that any spending was spent wrongfully. So even if you support Trump in that effort, which I don't know why you would, but even if you did support Trump in that effort to try to expose some sort of corruption, there was a legal pathway to do it. You chose the illegal pathway. So there is no way to use any of the evidence that Doge has allegedly accumulated in a court of law because of the lack of the chain of custody, and none of that can be used in a court of law, because then you just have to trust these 20-year-olds. Some of them have been actually convicted of crimes and things like that have been fired from jobs for fraud and things like that. It's just some of these people that are in Doge are naturally untrustworthy based on their credentials. And you just have to just put all your trust in these people that they actually found this evidence, that this evidence says what they say it says, that it has not been manipulated. When there's no chain of custody, that's why, see, court of law, you're supposed to be able to be protected in court of law to have a fair trial that shows that this person actually committed the crime. If you're just going to have somebody saying, well, we have evidence that says that this person definitely committed this crime and they're guilty, end of story, that's not the American system. So